Hey everybody, it's Kneecap here, and in this video we're going to be talking about Divine Protection versus Shield of Vengeance, defensive abilities for Retribution Paladins, found on the Retribution side of the talent tree. Which one's better, when to use them, what kind of content am I using what for, and stuff like that. It's obviously, the answer is going to be situational, of course. There's not one that is just flat better. It is completely situational on what kind of content you're doing and what kind of mindset you're going into that content with. But let's talk about the different times when you might want to do that. There's a debate in the Retribution community. Shield of Vengeance is better. It does damage. Plus, the numbers are not that much different. And then the other people say Divine Protection is better because worst case scenario, you're taking an absolute crap ton of damage over 8 seconds. And this is going to, deflect more of that, which is true. So that one must be better. And I think it's kind of a mindset thing, really, on that. And it might be like the level of content that you're doing. For example, if you're only doing Mythic plus 15s, for example, you might be like, well, Shield of Vengeance is clearly better. But if you're doing Mythic plus 25s, you might be like, well, Divine Protection is better, in your opinion or whatever. So it's very that in that way, it's situational as well. I think one case where it might be a little bit obvious is PvP, right? So Shield of Vengeance, first of all, it scales with your versatility. The amount that it absorbs scales with your versatility. So it's generally going to be better in PvP. But it also has the effect of, you pop the shield, yes, it can blow up and do a ton of damage to your opponent, but it also can make your opponents run away from you. So you can use it as a defensive in that way, and where you're getting people away from you. You're letting your team reset in some cases by using a Shield of Vengeance, rather than letting it pop on them, the enemy team letting it pop on them. So, it's absorbing more in PvP. It has other PvP effects, like it's not going to make, by PvP effect, I mean it's not going to make a PvE mob or boss run away from you to avoid the damage. So it has those kind of benefits as well. Is there a comp or something that you might use Divine Protection in? If you are doing some kind of rated battleground, is there perhaps a time you choose Divine Protection? Maybe so. But Shield of Vengeance, since it scales with versatility, is just readily made for PvP. And that, so that's like a situation where, for me, most of the time, or all the time for me, because I don't do high-end PvP, right, at all. So all the time for me, I would use Shield of Vengeance. It's just kind of like an obvious choice there for me. An obvious choice to use Divine Protection, however, is like in a Mythic raid encounter where over 8 seconds of time, you're taking a ridiculous amount of damage. Ridiculous enough to overwrite the amount that's absorbed by the Shield of Vengeance. And you can get that. So my tooltip right now is 30,000, just over 30,000 damage is what it can absorb. In order to, have that be 20% or whatever, so to make it equal, I would have to take 150k damage over 8 seconds to make it equal. So anytime that I'm taking 160k over 8 seconds, technically Divine Protection will, stop more damage coming in. I will not get the damage effect of Shield of Vengeance, of course, which does matter as well. But I am mitigating more damage once I reach over that threshold. However, this is an end of expansion. I do have 12% versatility in my PvE gear. I'm wearing the grenade trinket that has versatility on it as well. So there's a little bit more versatility at the beginning of an expansion. For example, for a PvE player, it's very common that you have 4% versatility, 2% versatility, sometimes 0 versatility at the very beginning of a expansion, the first raid tier and stuff. That's very possible to happen. So Shield of Vengeance loses a little bit of its power there. Not a ton. The versatility isn't the main thing that scales it. But if I was around at 4% versatility, I think I calculated that it would be absorbing 28,000 damage. So then that upper number lowers that I have to take over 8 seconds in order to justify picking Divine Protection. Now, in a Mythic raid encounter or very high Mythic Plus, it's not that uncommon for you to take that much damage over 8 seconds. I pulled up one example from a log on Warcraft logs, and over an 8-second time on Mythic Rygalon, just when you're in the down phase, this is just normal damage going off. It looks like there might be a little bit of an extra damage going off as well. But just kind of normal damage during there, and it's actually 173k. So it's 23k more That's the numbers down here. 173k over 8 seconds. So technically, I would gain more just from this random, kind of static damage going on during Ragolon. I would actually mitigate more damage by using Divine Protection. So when people say the math always works, because I've seen people say the math always works in favor of Shield of Vengeance, that's obviously not true, because you just have to pass that threshold over 8 seconds, and then the Divine Protection has mitigated more, and then therefore becomes the superior choice as far as defensive ability. Of course, Shield of Vengeance does have the offensive ability as well. Now, like I said, that number would be a little bit lower if I had a lower amount of versatility. Not a ton lower, but like thinking of beginning of Dragonflight and stuff like that. Well, the number will be higher because our health will be higher, but the damage coming in from the raids will be higher as well to make up for that health difference or whatever. Generally speaking, at the beginning of progression of any raid tier, Divine Protection will probably be a little bit better. You won't have as much gear. You won't be as prepared. You won't be as this or that. But then it is nice to have Shield of Vengeance on a re-clear of a raid, for example, to go through and try to parse with your Shield of Vengeance. Most rep paladins, I assume, I know for me, I have certain points during fights where I like to pop my Shield of Vengeance because I know it's going to just pop right away. I'm going to get the damage on the boss or damage on the ads or whatever and get that damage instantly. And I know it's, helping my DPS overall. And so that's something you can do on re-clear. However, it's nice to have Divine Protection for if something is messed up, for example. You're taking damage over time, but then something else gets messed up and an extra amount of damage comes in. Your shield would not help you at all during that because it's just going to be popped, and then you're kind of in trouble. Another thing I can think of where your shield popping instantly can be an issue is on a fight like Guardian of the First One, when you're soaking before you go into the circles on Guardian of the First Ones, with the big damage. I can't remember what the ability is called off the top of my head. With the big damage that he does, your shield pops obviously immediately, and then if you have one of those little missile firing things that go around the room targeting you at that time coming in, you're now negating none of that damage coming in. So your shield is popped. You take the damage after the shield, which is going to be a substantial amount of your health, and then you're taking 100% of that damage coming in. Whereas healing cooldowns are rolling anyways during that time. And so you would take a big chunk of damage, slightly more, let's say, than you did with your shield, but then you're also negating that missile damage coming in afterwards. And so that's very prudent as well to know, in that when it's just one ability coming in, the shield is much better of an ability. In most cases, because it has to be a huge amount of damage coming in to make the Divine Protection better. So when it's just one ability, the shield's quite good. It's just if there's any follow-up damage or constant damage over that 8 seconds, that's when Divine Protection can really shine for you. Again, and in my opinion, during like prog and stuff like that, for any raid tier, I'm going to be using Divine Protection unless it's like an easy boss. I know for sure, there's nothing here that can possibly, one-shot me. I'm just going to, there's nothing here where we have to stack and use our defensive cooldowns. I'm just going to use my Shield of Vengeance and blow up and do DPS. And that should be something that you're deciding on a per boss basis, a per dungeon basis, per content that you're doing basis is which one of these to use. They can both be quite good. And it just matters, knowing what they do and how they work matters a lot. Knowing the absorb number and knowing that you have to surpass that absorb number with Divine Protection to make it matter at all, right? If there's during a fight, if there's never an 8 seconds for my current gear where I take 150k damage, if that never happens to me, then I would just never take Divine Protection because it wouldn't make sense to. But if it does, then, it's not even that it doesn't make sense to, because it is important to point out, once your shield pops, you are taking 100% damage after that. So surging Azurite from the Jailer, right? Let's say when you're taking your six stack, right? The first one hits, it pops your shield, and now you're taking 2 to the face at full. So instead of taking 3 diluted surges, you're taking 2 full power surges. So what's better, 2 full power surges to the face or 3 diluted surges, essentially? And so that's kind of like a something to think about as well. And it depends on what your group composition's like, your raid composition's like, all that kind of stuff. For solo content, generally speaking, Shield of Vengeance is probably pretty good. Again, unless you're taking a ton of damage over 8 seconds during that solo content. So if you're out doing world quest or whatever by yourself or whatever, Shield of Vengeance probably a good choice because you're just fighting something. If it pops, it does damage to the enemies, and you're probably never taking a ridiculous amount of damage over 8 seconds. If you're trying to kill some really hard elite and he hits you with an ability and then it ticks up for you and you can't remove it and it ticks for 6 or 7 or 8 seconds, then maybe Divine Protection is better. It helps you be able to walk through it or something like that. It's completely situational, and anybody who tells you that it's only one or the other is flatly wrong. And it's just, you just have to know how they work, know your absorb amount on your shield. Obviously, Divine Protection's easy to know how it works, just 20% over 8 seconds. And yeah, know your absorb amounts and go from there. Make the decision that's best for you, depending on the content that you're doing. And so, yeah, I just wanted to kind of make a video about this because I have just seen a lot of debate about it. The big thing I'm seeing is people saying, well, Divine Protection sucks. I'm always going to use Shield of Vengeance. And I do want to quash that narrative because there are cases where that's just not the case. And I think it's easy to say that in the pre-patch here, where just passively, many of us probably have 8, 10, like I said, I have 12%, maybe people have 14%, 16% verse, and you have all this verse or whatever, just because we have bloated stats at the end of the expansion, and you have all this verse, and you're absorbing even more with your Shield of Vengeance. Again, verse is not the main stat for it, but it does affect it 100%. So that's where I'm at with that, guys. Hopefully I'll have more videos talking about more of these talents and maybe these talent choices as well, because I do think it's interesting. I want to talk about Radiant Decree at some point for sure. That's definitely one that I want to do, Radiant Decree versus Ashes to Dust, because I think Radiant Decree is getting a little bit too much love for where it's currently tuned at. It's not a bad ability by any means, but I just wish it was a little bit better so it was like an obvious choice. And I do not think it's the obvious choice at all. So I plan on doing a video about Radiant Decree. Hopefully this video helped somebody out here. Again, just kind of understand how the abilities work and choose the best one for the content that you're doing. If you're doing casual content or you're a casual player, Shield of Vengeance is probably just fine to use. If you're doing high-end content or you want to get into high-end content, you just kind of have to know the encounter that you're doing or the dungeon that you're doing and know if Divine Protection is going to provide you value. So that's it for this one, guys. As always, I do ask you to please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out so much. And other than that, everybody, have a good one.